I was 58 when she left me, a number that felt like a milestone I'd never prepared for. It was a Thursday in early April, the kind of day where the air carried the faint promise of spring blossoms just starting to peek through the branches, a soft breeze rustling the curtains through the open kitchen window. Ellen made coffee that morning, just as she had for the past 32 years of our marriage. I sat at the worn oak table we bought at a garage sale in our first year together, the one with a scratch on the corner from when our son, Michael, had dropped a toy truck on it. The familiar clink of her spoon against the ceramic mug echoed in the quiet kitchen as she stirred in a teaspoon of sugar, my usual. She leaned over, her lips brushing my cheek in a kiss that felt colder than I remembered, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Daniel." Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the hum of the refrigerator. I barely looked up from the newspaper, my eyes skimming an article about a local charity run, assuming she meant she'd be late from work again. "It's fine," I mumbled, not noticing the tremor in her hands as she set the mug down in front of me. I left for my morning walk, a habit I'd picked up since retiring from my accounting job 2 years earlier. The neighborhood was quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel under my sneakers and the occasional chirp of a sparrow. When I returned home that evening, the house felt different, too still, too empty. I called out for her, my voice echoing off the walls, but there was no answer. I walked into our bedroom, and the sight hit me like a punch to the gut. Half the closet was empty. Her dresses, her scarves, the bright red coat she'd worn every winter, they were all gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of her lavender perfume clinging to the air. On the kitchen table sat a note, one line scrawled in her hurried handwriting on a piece of yellow legal pad paper. "I can't keep pretending anymore. I'm sorry." I stood there, the note trembling in my hands, rereading it as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less final. The silence of the house pressed against me, a suffocating reminder of her absence. I didn't even know who I was without her. We'd built a life together. 2 kids, Michael and Sarah, a mortgage we'd paid off with a celebratory dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, retirement plans sketched out on napkins over Sunday brunches, dreams of traveling to Italy, of buying a little cabin by the lake. Now, it was all unraveling, thread by thread, and I was left holding the frayed ends. I stumbled to the living room, my legs unsteady, and sank into the faded blue armchair where I'd spent countless evenings watching old westerns with Ellen curled up beside me. My eyes landed on my old acoustic guitar, propped up in the corner, its wood dulled by years of neglect. I hadn't played since the kids were little, when I'd strum lullabies to get them to sleep, Ellen humming along softly from the doorway. I picked it up, the strings biting into my fingertips, and played a few chords. The notes were hesitant, out of tune, but they filled the empty space with a whisper of the man I used to be, a man who laughed easily, who dreamed big, who believed love could last forever. Now, I wasn't so sure. Lesson: the small moments we take for granted, like a morning coffee or a kiss goodbye, can be the last threads holding a relationship together. I learned to pay attention to these moments because they often carry the weight of unspoken truths, truths I'd been too blind to see. Chapter 1. The Shock. Divorce after 50 isn't a loud explosion. It's a slow, creeping fracture that you don't notice until the ground beneath you gives way, leaving you scrambling for something to hold on to. For me, it was a thunderclap that shattered the illusion of stability I'd clung to for decades. I hadn't seen it coming, or maybe I had, but I'd buried the signs so deep I could pretend they didn't exist. The late nights when Ellen would come home from book club, with no books in hand, her eyes distant as she mumbled something about traffic. The way she stopped asking about my day, her gaze fixed on her phone when I tried to tell her about the new client I'd taken on as a freelance consultant. The separate vacations she'd go to the beach with her sister, laughing about needing girl time, while I'd visit Michael in Chicago, pretending I didn't mind the distance growing between us. I told myself she was just tired, that after retirement we'd find our rhythm again, maybe take that trip to Italy we'd always talked about. But the signs were there, glaring in hindsight, and I'd ignored them all, too comfortable in the routine we built to admit something was wrong. The first few days after she left, I wandered the house like a ghost, unable to process the emptiness that had settled in. Her favorite mug, a white ceramic one with a sunflower painted on it, a gift from Sarah for Mother's Day, still sat in the dishwasher, a faint lipstick stain on the rim. The fridge held her half-eaten yogurt, the kind with chunks of strawberry I never liked but always bought for her because it made her smile. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out, as if keeping it there might somehow bring her back. I kept replaying our last conversation, searching for clues I'd missed. Had there been something in her voice, a tremor I hadn't noticed? Had her eyes lingered on me a moment too long, trying to memorize me before she walked away? The weight of my ignorance crushed me. I didn't even know when I'd lost her, or how long she'd been planning to leave. I sat on the couch, staring at the walls, the silence so thick it felt like a physical thing pressing against my chest. The living room was a museum of our life together. The framed photo of our wedding day on the mantel, Ellen in a simple white dress, me grinning like I'd won the lottery, the bookshelf filled with novels we'd read aloud to each other on rainy afternoons. The rug we'd argued over at the store, her wanting blue, me wanting green, until we'd compromised on a gray one neither of us loved. Every corner held a memory, and now every memory hurt. I tried calling her that first night, my fingers fumbling with the phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Her voice on the recording, "Hi, this is Ellen. Leave a message," was so cheerful it felt like a cruel joke. I hung up without saying anything, the lump in my throat too big to speak around. Lesson: denial can be a comfortable shield, but it blinds you to reality. I learned that ignoring the cracks in a relationship doesn't make them disappear. It only delays the inevitable collapse, leaving you unprepared for the fallout. Chapter 2. It isn't just the death. Losing a marriage is its own kind of death, a grief that seeps into every corner of your life, staining everything with its shadow. I went through the stages, each one carving out a piece of me until I felt hollowed out, a shell of the man I'd been. Denial came first. I kept expecting Ellen to walk through the door, her arms full of grocery bags, laughing about how this was all a misunderstanding, a bad dream we'd wake up from together. Then anger, a burning rage that made me want to scream at her for leaving, at myself for not seeing it, at the world for letting this happen. I'd pace the house at night, my fists clenched, muttering to myself about how unfair it was, how I'd given her everything, my youth, my loyalty, my dreams, and this was how she repaid me. Bargaining followed, late-night prayers to a God I wasn't sure I believed in, promising I'd be a better husband, a better man, if she'd just come back. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining scenarios where I could fix this, where I could turn back time and be the husband she needed. Depression hit hardest, a heavy fog that made getting out of bed feel like climbing a mountain, each step a monumental effort. I'd spend hours sitting in the dark, the TV on but unwatched, the sound a distant hum as I replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for the exact point where it all went wrong. Finally, acceptance crept in, a quiet resignation that this was my new reality, that Ellen wasn't coming back, and I had to figure out how to live without her. The first month was unbearable. I drank too much, the whiskey burning my throat as I sat in the dark, staring at her empty chair at the dining table. The bottle became my companion, its amber liquid a temporary escape from the pain, but it always wore off, leaving me feeling worse than before. I called her once, my hands shaking as I dialed her number, the whiskey giving me a false sense of courage. She didn't pick up. I left a message, my voice breaking as I slurred, "I still love you, Ellen. Please, let's talk. I can change, I swear." She never called back, and that silence hurt more than any words could have, a confirmation that she was truly gone. My daughter, Sarah, noticed the bottles piling up in the recycling bin when she came to check on me. Her face, so much like Ellen's with those same hazel eyes, was etched with worry as she sat me down on the couch, her hands gripping mine. "Dad, you need help," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "Please, for me, go to therapy." I resisted at first, the idea of spilling my guts to a stranger feeling like a betrayal of my pride. But Sarah's pleading look broke through my defenses, and I agreed. My first therapy session was in a small office downtown, the walls painted a soft beige, a potted plant in the corner looking as wilted as I felt. The therapist, Dr. Harper, was a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and a calm voice that made me feel both safe and exposed. "I thought therapy was for broken people," I told her, my arms crossed tightly over my chest, my tone defensive. She looked at me, her gaze steady, and said, "Maybe it is. But aren't you one of them?" It was the first time I admitted to myself that I was, indeed, broken, shattered into pieces I wasn't sure I could put back together. Lesson: grief isn't just for the dead, it's for the living, too, for the parts of yourself that die when a relationship ends. I learned that allowing myself to feel each stage of loss, even the ugly ones like anger and despair, was the only way to move forward, because you can't heal what you refuse to face. Chapter 3. The friends who stayed, and the ones who didn't. Divorce doesn't just fracture a marriage, it fractures your entire social world, exposing the fault lines in relationships you thought were solid. Couples friends we'd known for decades drifted away, their invitations to barbecues and game nights drying up as if I'd become contagious. Some took Ellen's side, whispering about how I must have driven her away. Maybe I'd been too distant, too focused on work, too boring. I overheard one of them, a woman named Janet who'd once hosted us for Thanksgiving, say at the grocery store, "I always knew Ellen deserved better." The words stung, a sharp reminder of my failure. Others simply disappeared, unable to handle the awkwardness of choosing a side, their absence a quieter kind of betrayal. Only a few real ones stayed, their loyalty a lifeline I didn't know I needed until it was all I had. My buddy Tom called every Friday night without fail, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of my grief. We didn't even talk about Ellen. We'd watch the same baseball game on TV, him in his apartment across town, me in my empty living room, the sound of the crowd cheering through the phone a small comfort. Strike three. Tom would shout when the pitcher made a good play, and I'd manage a small smile, the first I'd felt all week. "You're gonna be okay, Dan," he'd say before hanging up, his voice gruff but sincere, and I clung to those words like a promise, repeating them to myself in the dark. My son, Michael, was furious with Ellen, his anger a mirror of my own. He'd call from Chicago, his voice tight with rage, saying, "How could she do this to you, Dad?" To us. My granddaughter, Lily, who was only 6, cried for weeks, her small voice trembling as she asked, "Why doesn't Grandma love us anymore?" I'd hold her close, her tears soaking into my shirt, and lie, "She still loves you, sweetheart," because the truth was too heavy for her to bear. I hate that my pain is now their pain too, I confessed to Tom one night, my voice thick with guilt as we sat on the phone, the game long over. He just nodded through the silence, understanding in a way only a true friend can, his presence a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. There were others who surprised me with their kindness. Mrs. Carter, the elderly widow next door, started bringing over casseroles, her hands trembling with age as she handed me a dish of lasagna one evening. "I've been where you are," she said, her eyes soft with memory. "It gets better, dear." Her words, simple as they were, gave me a flicker of hope, a reminder that others had survived this kind of loss and come out the other side. Lesson: true friends don't need to fix your pain, they just sit with you in it, offering their presence as a quiet strength. I learned to value the ones who stay, because they're the ones who help you rebuild, piece by piece, even when you can't see the whole picture yet. Chapter 4. Rediscovering Himself. 6 months after Ellen left, something shifted inside me, a small spark of life I hadn't felt since that Thursday in April. I started walking every morning, the crisp air clearing my mind as I wandered through our neighborhood park. The park was a small oasis in our suburban town, with a winding path lined with maple trees, their leaves turning shades of amber and crimson as fall approached. I'd watch the squirrels dart across the grass, their frantic energy a contrast to the stillness I felt inside, and slowly, I began to feel the fog of depression lift, just a little. I signed up for a cooking class on a whim, craving something new, something that wasn't tied to the life I'd lost. I even bought a dog, a scrappy little terrier I named Max, who forced me to get out of bed each day with his insistent barking, his tail wagging like a metronome as he begged for a walk. I traveled alone for the first time in decades, a solo trip to the Blue Ridge Mountains where I rented a small cabin by a lake, the water so still it mirrored the sky. I sat on the dock each morning, a mug of coffee in my hands, and let the silence heal me, the sound of loons calling in the distance a reminder that the world was still turning, even if my own had stopped. The cooking class was held in a community center downtown, a bright room with long stainless steel counters and the smell of garlic and fresh herbs in the air. I was the oldest student there, surrounded by young couples and a few single moms, all of them chatting easily as they chopped vegetables and measured flour. I felt out of place, my hands clumsy as I tried to dice an onion, the knife slipping more than once. On the third class, I burned the risotto so badly the smoke alarm went off, a shrill beep that made everyone jump. The other students laughed as we opened the windows to let the smoke out, the cool evening air rushing in. The instructor, a kind woman named Clara with a streak of gray in her dark hair, just smiled and said, "We all burn something eventually, it's how you learn." Her words were light, but they hit me hard, a reminder that failure wasn't the end, that I could start again. For the first time in months, I laughed too, a real laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, warming me from the inside out. I started to feel alive again, like I was waking up from a long, dark sleep, my senses sharpening as I noticed the world around me, the tang of lemon zest on my fingers, the sound of Clara's laughter, the way the light caught the steam rising from a simmering pot. I began writing, first in a journal I kept on my nightstand, the pages filling with scattered thoughts and memories as I tried to make sense of my grief. I wrote about the day Ellen and I met, at a college dance where she'd worn a yellow dress and laughed at my terrible jokes, about the way she looked holding Sarah for the first time, her face glowing with a love I'd never seen before, about the fights we'd had. The ones I'd thought were small but must have meant more to her than I realized. Writing became a way to process the pain, to untangle the knots of guilt and regret that had tied me down. Then, I started writing short stories, fictional tales about the life I wished I'd lived, a man who sailed around the world, a father who built treehouses for his kids, a husband who never let his wife slip away. I hadn't written since college. I wrote in my journal one night, the pen scratching against the paper as Max slept at my feet. I forgot how much I loved it, how it feels to create something out of nothing, to find meaning in the act of putting words on a page. I also started gardening, something Ellen had always loved but I'd never had the patience for. I bought a few packets of seeds, marigolds, zinnias, sunflowers, and spent a weekend digging up a small patch in the backyard, the earth cool and heavy under my hands. I planted the seeds with care, following the instructions on the packets, and checked on them every morning, watching as tiny green shoots pushed through the soil. There was something grounding about it, a reminder that growth takes time, that you can't rush it. But if you're patient, something beautiful can emerge from the dirt. Lesson: reinvention doesn't require grand gestures. It starts with small steps, like a morning walk or a burned risotto. I learned that rediscovering passions I'd buried, like writing and gardening, could help me find a new version of myself, one that wasn't defined by the person I'd lost. Chapter 5. Dating Again. A year after the divorce, I decided to try dating again, a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. I downloaded an app, fumbling through the profile setup with shaky fingers, uploading a photo Sarah had taken of me at the park, Max sitting at my feet. I wrote a bio that felt painfully inadequate. 58, recently divorced, likes dogs and cooking, but not very good at it. And started swiping, my heart pounding each time I got a match. My first date was a disaster. I showed up in a pantsuit that smelled faintly of mothballs, a relic from my accounting days, and asked about her retirement fund within the first 5 minutes, my nerves making me ramble about compound interest and 401ks. She was a librarian named Susan, with a sharp wit and a love of mystery novels, but my awkwardness was too much for her. She left before dessert, muttering something about needing to feed her cat, and I went home and laughed at myself in the mirror, realizing how out of practice I was. I'd been with Ellen since I was 24. I didn't know how to date, how to flirt, how to be anyone other than her husband. I went on a few more dates, each one a little less disastrous than the last. There was Margaret, a florist who talked nonstop about her ex-husband, her voice bitter as she stabbed at her salad, and Rachel, a yoga instructor who tried to get me to meditate in the middle of a crowded restaurant. Her eyes closed as I sat there, mortified. I was starting to think dating wasn't for me, that maybe I was too old, too broken, to find someone new. But then I met Laura. Laura was 55, a widow who'd lost her husband to cancer 5 years earlier. We matched on the app, and after a few messages, we agreed to meet for coffee at a small cafe downtown, a cozy place with mismatched chairs and the smell of roasted beans in the air. She was waiting for me when I arrived, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose bun, a warm smile on her face as she waved me over. We ordered our coffees, hers a latte with almond milk, mine black, and sat by the window, watching the world go by as we talked. She told me about her husband, how they'd loved hiking together, how she still kept his favorite scarf in her dresser drawer. I told her about Ellen, the words spilling out more easily than I expected, about the note, the empty closet, the way I'd been trying to rebuild. Laura listened, her eyes soft with understanding, and when I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're doing better than you think," she said, and I believed her. We started meeting for coffee every Saturday morning, a ritual that became the highlight of my week. We'd share stories about our lives, her childhood on a farm in Iowa, my summers working at my dad's hardware store, over steaming mugs, the cafe bustling around us with the hum of conversation and the clink of cups. Laura had a quiet strength about her, a resilience that inspired me. She'd been through her own kind of hell, losing her husband to a disease that stole him slowly, but she'd come out the other side with a grace I admired. We'd sit in comfortable silence sometimes, watching the rain streak down the window or the leaves fall in autumn, and I'd feel a peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't fireworks, not the passionate love I'd had with Ellen in our early days, but it was real, a steady, warm connection that felt like a soft place to land. And that was enough. Lesson: love after loss doesn't have to be a grand romance. It can be a quiet connection, a shared cup of coffee on a rainy morning. I learned to appreciate companionship for what it is, not what I thought it should be, and to let go of the idea that love has to look the same at 58 as it did at 24. Chapter 6. What he learned. Through this journey, I learned lessons I never expected to need at 58, lessons that reshaped the way I saw myself, my marriage, and my future. Marriage doesn't define you. Your worth isn't tied to someone else's presence in your life, a realization that took months of therapy to fully grasp. I'd spent so long seeing myself as Ellen's husband, as part of a unit, that I'd forgotten how to be just Daniel, a man with his own dreams, his own passions. Being left doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means you're human, flawed and messy, and capable of growth. I'd blamed myself for Ellen's departure, convinced I'd failed her in some unforgivable way, but Dr. Harper helped me see that relationships are a two-way street, that her leaving was as much about her as it was about me. Falling apart is sometimes the first step to being rebuilt, because you can't grow without breaking first. Those early months of grief, when I'd drink myself into a stupor or cry in the shower where no one could hear me, felt like the end of the world, but they were also the beginning of something new. They stripped me down to my core, forcing me to confront the parts of myself I'd ignored for years, the parts that were scared, that felt unworthy, that longed for connection. Healing isn't linear. Some days I still miss Ellen, the way she'd hum while folding laundry, the way she'd laugh at my terrible puns, the way she'd rest her head on my shoulder during long car rides. Most days, I don't, because I've built a life that's mine, not ours. I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved the peace that came with letting go, the freedom to move forward without the weight of resentment dragging me down. I also learned practical things, small lessons that added up to a bigger truth. I learned how to cook a decent risotto, thanks to Clara's patient guidance, and found joy in the act of creating something with my hands, something I could share with others. I learned how to be alone without being lonely, to enjoy my own company as I walked Max through the park or sat on my porch with a book, the sun warm on my face. I learned how to ask for help, whether it was calling Tom on a bad day or admitting to Dr. Harper that I didn't know how to move forward. And I learned how to love again, not in the same way I loved Ellen, but in a new way, with Laura, a way that was softer, steadier, more honest. Lesson: healing is a choice, not a destination, a series of small decisions that lead you to a better place. I learned that forgiveness is for yourself, not the other person, and that growth comes from embracing the messiness of life, from allowing yourself to feel the pain and the joy in equal measure. Closing words. To anyone who's been left late in life, it's not the end. You're still here, still breathing, and there is so much more ahead. Pain changes you. It strips you down to your core, exposing the raw, tender parts of yourself you'd rather hide. But healing transforms you into someone stronger, wiser, more whole. I'm not the man I was before Ellen left, and I don't want to be. That man was complacent, too afraid to rock the boat, too blind to see the cracks in his marriage. The man I am now is braver, more open, more willing to take risks, whether it's signing up for a cooking class or asking a woman out for coffee. I've learned to find joy in the small things, a dog's wagging tail, a well-written story, a shared laugh with a friend, and to trust that the big things will come in time. Tomorrow, I'll sit down with a couple who stayed together for 30 years, only to realize they'd become complete strangers, their love eroded by years of unspoken resentments and unfulfilled dreams. I'll listen to their story, my notebook open in front of me, and maybe I'll learn something new about love, about loss, about starting over. But for now, I'm content to be here, in this moment, a man who's been broken and rebuilt, ready for whatever comes next. I'll take Max for a walk in the park, the leaves crunching under my feet, and I'll breathe in the crisp autumn air, grateful for the life I've built, for the man I've become. Final lesson: life doesn't stop when someone leaves. It's an invitation to begin again, to write a new chapter in your story. I learned that the end of one chapter is just the start of another, and the story is far from over. You can't control how it begins, but you can choose how it continues, and that choice is yours alone.